Hi, this video is about boundaries. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about boundaries, and oftentimes when I hear people talk about boundaries, I hear them actually talking about rules that they've set for other people's behavior. So let me clarify my understanding of a boundary. The way I understand boundaries is that a boundary is a point of connection. A boundary is what I show up for and how I show up. Okay? So most of the time when I'm holding my boundaries, I'm just not showing up. I'm just not showing up. Because if something is in violation of my boundaries, I'm just not around to experience it. So this is like the majority of holding boundaries, as we talk about it, or preserving a standard for experience, is not showing up to things that aren't up to that standard. So boundaries are the active reflection of my standards and how I'm holding them. So the biggest way that I hold to these standards with boundaries is something just doesn't get my attention whatsoever. The news, when it's trying to cause me fear, it doesn't get my attention. Men, when they come into my DMs and just say hi, that just doesn't get my attention. And I simply don't show up. And then the other part of boundaries is how I show up. And this is the most delicious part of boundaries. This is where boundaries become a point of connection. How I show up. My boundary is that in order for me to show up, I need to be able to show up exactly how I want to show up. I need to be able to show up in the fullness of my expression. I need to be able to show up in the fullness of my experience and the validity of my experience. I need to be able to show up as my most loving and generous and gracious self. That's how I want to show up to connection. So when I am exercising boundaries, I'm observing a situation and assuring that I will feel safe to relate and to show up how I want to show up. If there's anything in here that looks like it would somehow cause me in my own experience to feel unsafe showing up, I simply don't show up. I don't ask the container to create safety for me, because as soon as I'm feeling an experience of safety, it doesn't matter whether that's coming from the outside world or the inside world, I just don't show up. So important, because this is how I start to define my worth. It's how I start to define what gets my precious, precious energy and attention. It's how I take a stand for how I deserve to experience the world, how I deserve to show up in the world, how I deserve to be seen, how I deserve to be understood. All of this is what boundaries are. And when I take a stand for my standards and my boundaries, I am able to show up as the most vibrant, delicious, radiant, open, vulnerable, soft, sweet, just delicious person that I can be when I don't need to protect myself. So I'm keeping an eye out for my own safety when I look at the conditions of something. Now, when I'm talking about how I don't ask the container to change, sometimes I do. Okay, so sometimes when I notice something that doesn't feel quite safe, if the rest of it feels really safe and I feel safe to do so, I'll press on it and say, hey, how strict is this little element here? Is there any wiggle room in here for this to accommodate me? And this is a radical stance for my belonging, that it's okay for me to ask that the world adjust. And if the world does not adjust to my request, it's not because I'm not valid. It's not because my experience is not important. sometimes things can't adjust for us. And all I need to do is respect my own standard, respect the standard that the thing is not adjusting from, that gets to be its own standard and I get to have my own standards. I don't have to make a judgment. I don't have to claim that I was excluded. I don't have to claim that what it's providing is unsafety. What it's providing is clarity, and I get to choose in or out of that clarity. And I can take a stand for something, and the answer can be yes or no. This is a pretty radical boundary practice. It's a really large departure from what we normally talk about with boundaries, but boundaries as a point of connection is about how I can bring people in very, very close and give us both the experience of me that I want to give us. And it can be, it's so delicious. It's so delicious to relate from this place of safety. And I hope that you gift it to yourself because you have the opportunity for it. Love you.